Good afternoon, everyone. I, Pururaj, on behalf of NEN and Vadbhani Foundations would like to welcome you all for this webinar and also introduce our expert, Dr. Radhika Meenakshi Shankar, founder and CEO, Wise Owl Consulting Services. Dr. Radhika actively promotes entrepreneurship and incubation in the industry and academy. In addition to mentoring startups, she also provides consultancy for MSMEs through her venture Wise Owl Consulting Services. She has over 20 years of experience in teaching finance and entrepreneurship and is a registered mentor with many reputed institutions. She is also a certified NEN educator. Before I hand over the floor to Dr. Radhika, here are a few reminders for the audience. You will all be on mute by default. You may ask a question by typing in the panel provided, or if you wish to speak to the speaker directly, then you may click on the raise hand button. You will be provided the audio access only when question and answer session will begin towards the end of the webinar. Please ensure to share the list of participants with us once the webinar is over. It's a sincere request to all the faculty members to upload the details on our IncapMe tool. We will be conducting polling in between the sessions. Please be sure to participate in each of the polls. Over to you, Dr. Radhika.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Radhika here, and I'm going to talk to you some time on raising funds for startup businesses. Money, money, money. It's all about money, honey. As the saying goes, every business unit, small, big, medium, require money for starting up the business, for running the business, while growing the business, and also for closing the business. How do they get all this money? How much money they require? Where do they get this money from? Primarily, startups and any business raise money in two ways. One is called equity and the other is called as debt. Equity is ownership funds. When the owners bring in funds, it's called equity. On the other hand, when they borrow money for interest, then it is called as debt. We know that. So these are the two main ways. So whenever you raise money from whatever be the source, it has to be either an equity or a debt. Now that is the primary cardinal rule. So what are the various sources from where you can raise equity and from where you can raise debt? That is what we are going to see in the next few minutes. There are many sources. There are many sources from where we can take loans. We can take funds for people to start the business with. Let us see a couple of these sources. You have the government, which is the first one, bank and financial institutions, VCs and angel investors, private and public equity. You can, if you don't want to borrow or take, you can do a lot of bootstrapping. And also there is a new one called crowdfunding, which we'll look at in a few minutes from now. So let us look at some of the most important of these sources one by one. Okay. So let us start with banks, of course. Always we associate money and banks, right? So banks accepting the purpose of lending, that is what is their main motto. So they accept deposits from us and then they also lend money to us. So what is the main thing that drives the bank's decision to give you or lend money to MSME? One of the things is banks have priority lending, one to agriculture and the other to micro, small and medium enterprises. And because of this priority lending that the banks give, many of the micro, small and medium enterprises take a lot of loans from banks, either in the form to service their working capital needs, usually, mostly, in fact, 95% of the time, the working capitals are all financed through the credit limits given by the bank. On the other hand, they also take long-term loans from the bank, and they normally service at a lesser rate than which is normally given for other loan purposes. There are collaterals which they ask for, but now there is a new scheme which has come, which is called as the collateral-free guarantee loan, CGT MSME. I'll talk to you about it a little while from now. What do bankers actually look for? Bankers actually look for 5 C's, right? Character, collaterals, commercials, because they definitely need to know whether you'll be able to pay them back, And then they look at commitment from you. Are you a person who pay regularly, etc. And consistency. Are you consistent in your thoughts, deed, action, looking at the way you're going to live out your vision that you have for your business. So whether it's character, collaterals, consistency, commitment, and commercials. Now these are the 5 C's that a bank looks for in an MSME before they lend money to them. The CGT MSME scheme, or CGT MSE as it's called, this is a collateral-free loan up to 1 crore that is given to small and medium enterprises. Collateral-free but not interest-free. Interest is of course at 10 base rate plus about 4%. That was what it is. They were trying to cap it at that. So roughly around 14 to 15% is the interest rate. And it is also given both as for full term loans as well as for working capital for the increase in the LCs. So this is by far becoming very, very popular. And the other thing is this particular loan is given through the nationalized banks, and this guarantee cover is given by a specialized trust that has been created. And besides this CGT MSME loan, there are other regular loans which are given on the basis of collaterals and the working capital loans that I was talking to you about. One of the biggest plus points in taking money from the bank, which is in the form of a debt, it's traditional, it's time tested, and it's proven, and there have always been a whole lot of banks, and the banking network is really big, and the government also can act from time and again for loan waivers, etc., etc. And also when there is bad debts happening for these banks, the government sets out to absorb some of them. And for the entrepreneurs, this is the most easiest, and when they consistently show good banking character with the bank and develop a relationship with the bank, then it becomes a little more easier for their working capital needs to go on requesting for an increase in their credit limit for their operational needs. And it also becomes very viable for them to ask for a long-term loan based on their banking relationships or the company's account with the bank and the way the company account is working. But what are the downsides of with the bank? One of the biggest problems is there's a lot of bureaucracy and things that go with it, and it's not transparent, and there's a lot of red tape, some file movement, so much of documentation to do, etc., etc. Now I have a couple of my friends who tell me, Radhika, forget all these things. I go to the bank manager and I explain a whole lot of things, and then he agrees, and for example, she needs working capital because she is working with weavers, and she needs to give them a lot of money beforehand before they do hand woven, because hers is a very ancient form of designs, etc. And antique weaving designs is what is her forte for her boutique. And so therefore she has only a handful of these weavers, and all their needs have to be taken care by her. So her operational needs in terms requires her to pay the weavers besides paying for all the raw materials. Now she goes and explains this to the bank manager, etc., 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 and then her limit is going to get enhanced. By then the manager changes and another manager comes, and she has to start all over the explanation all over again. And so she was saying that I'm fed up. This is it is that sort of a red tapeism that I'm talking. That sort of a administrative hassle that I'm talking. But that's just a couple of cases. But most of the time, you see, majority of the MSMEs, all their operational working needs, the banks are doing human services, and this new scheme that has come up, more than 5.25 lakh crores of such funds have been released under the scheme, and this scheme is becoming very, very popular, the CGT MSME. This is not available for retail. It is available only for manufacturing and services. Right. I'm also looking at the next source, which is the government. Okay. And when I say government, the first thing that comes into my mind is seed funding. One of the biggest problems that entrepreneurial finance faces is the lack of seed funds. What is a seed fund? Seed fund is the initial amount that has to be given to explore an idea. Now, usually seed funds are most requested by students because that's the time you have a lot of time to explore and meet. And of course, a lot of other startup entrepreneurs also require seed funds. And the highest risk is with seed fund because if your idea fails, then the investor will not get the money back. And more often than not, it is the government which tries to absorb this huge risk and a lot of seed funds. Of course, there are a whole lot of investors who do only seed funds. I'll come to private seed funding a little while from now. But currently, I'm going to start with the government. The government gives a lot of grants. They run a whole lot of schemes. They give a lot of subsidies. These are the ways that they try to finance startups. In fact, even the Modi government has recently announced a huge fund for startups in order to, and waiver of startups failures, etc., and their loans for that. So there's a whole lot, it's still coming up. And what we look at when a government, we're looking at a galore of schemes that come up for startups. Whether it is a waiver of taxes, whether it is a waiver of the sales tax, or whether it is free land to start your business, or whether it is capital subsidy wherein 25%, especially Goa's government, I remember, they give most of the states, they give 25% of your investment as back as your subsidy. So there are many various schemes that is being given by the government by way in which you can reduce your money required. And only thing with the government is whether it's a grant. Normally, if you look at student projects I was talking to you about, that's where the seed funds come in a lot. We have this IEDC which comes up, and the Innovation Entrepreneurial Development. And for that, they give 1 lakh per student project for about 5 projects every year, and up to a max of 8 lakhs, I think. And this is given for all types of projects approved by a board that is set up by the college. And once the college is recognized as an IEDC and is given the IEDC funds, then the college every year carry out the exercise of finding 5 innovative projects and funding them. And then this is then followed up to commercialization. This has become a big boon for many of the engineering students where I find, and science students, where I find a whole lot of them taking up new projects because it's a good seed fund. Of course, if the academic institution has been allotted or any other institution has been recognized as a technology business incubator, technology business incubator, TBI, and then what happens is they get even more better funding from the Technology Development Board, TDB. And when a TDB recognizes your incubator, you can fund up to 25 lakhs per candidate of your incubatee. Of course, you have the set of rules and regulations that needs to be followed and kept by the incubator. But when the TDB gives, it gives up to 25 lakhs per incubatee. And if you look at NSTDB, they also lend up to anywhere between 2 lakhs and 50 lakhs per project, per incubatee. And so long as this institution is recognized by these, then the incubatees under this incubator will definitely get this much amount. So therefore, these are some of the seed fundings that you can get via the government. Now, one of the biggest things is when you get funded by the government a lot of things can be done, especially if you go through, if you look at the Department of Science and Technology, they offer some amount directly for high-tech fund. Of course, they define what is a high-tech fund. If you go to their website, it defines what comes under high-tech. And if your company is coming under, your startup is coming under that high-tech, then they will not only help you, they give you the capability, but also help you in capacity building by giving you funds. So being funded by the government, you get a whole lot of other perks as well. You not only get to collude with a lot of government agencies and collaborate with them and get help. You also get world-class international sources. Compared to world-class, you get much more help from the government sources, and there is also credibility because the government is involved. And obviously, when you say that your startup is already starting with the help of the government, your everybody sorts of trusts you, and therefore your bottom lines can immediately go up. So of course, it looks hunky and dory when I talk, but actually getting the government to give you the funds, definitely you have a whole lot of documentation to do. And many often than not, startups find that, in spite of their busy schedule, because that's when they need give their time the most to the startup, they'll be caught up doing a lot of documentation and running around to the government agencies and, looking at papers and putting the dates and this and that. So they get very cheesed off and say, okay, let's do this on a later date. But some of the government organizations that help you with the funding are all these various, especially for IT companies today, Indian IT sector, most of the startups are all financed a lot by the Department of Information and Technology. Of course, we have the VCs, venture capitalists and angels who have done their big bit. The biotechnology park here in Hyderabad, where I reside, is another big example where they give you seed funds and the government gives a lot of funding when you go start your business in biotechnology in the park. And most of the IT parks that you see, the Cyberabad, etc., are all funded. You can get the funds from the government for your company. TBI, the best one of course is in Trivandrum, and the best example I can give you of TBI is in Trivandrum, which is really good, and they have really more than, I think, about 200 companies. They've been recognized as the best incubator in Asia Pacific region, and they have actually graduated more than about 200 startups to fledgling businesses in the IT park in Trivandrum. So these are all really startups which have grown big with the help of the government, and so the government is one of the biggest places where you can go to when you are a startup for raising your money. Now I'm talking to you, giving you a whole lot of technology development board supported technical business incubators and steps. So they are in Mysore, Erode, and Coimbatore, Pune. A lot of these are some of the examples that I can give you. So having finished banking and government, let us come to one of the most important sources of raising funds, and these are the angels. And we all know angels, as the name means, is somebody who's always there to protect you and take care of you. And who's there, your angel? Well, the angels here in raising funds definitely means as a single individual person who is rich and who is willing to lend you the money. Story starts, the first angel is the queen of who gave what did she bank on? She thought that if he does find a route, then she'll have all the spices market. The entire Europe spice market can be controlled by her because she has the access to the spices of India. If he doesn't find the route or gets lost in the way, back she loses is a bag of gold. Well, that is entirely the attitude on which angels and venture capitalists are built. They take enormous amount of risk for a huge amount of they would get, and therefore they are willing to lend this money. So angels are basically today, as I told you, individuals, rich individuals. But today, angel has gone into a different level. Today we have a consortium of rich people, and they have called the angel network. So for example, we have Hyderabad Angel Network, Indian Angel Network, the Mumbai Angels, Rajasthan Angels. There are many now slowly coming up. And all these are angel networks where they take up the startups case. You apply for money from these network. The panel sits through it, checks it out, and finds the area of interest of angels who are their members. And the angels then decide amongst themselves who all would like to play this, lend money to this particular unit. And then based on that, they form a small consortium and they start giving the money to the startup. And angels are far more easier to approach, and they are not much of hassles, and they can do direct lending as well as also take part in your equity. And they normally like to finance areas of their interest, areas in which they feel it could be synergic to their businesses, and in areas which they are very comfortable and highly networked. So they are very sector specific rather than agnostic. But the thing in going to an angel network is maybe there would be other angels who would be a part of your network and would be interested in your sector. Then that's where you go to an angel network rather than an individual angel. But again, when you go to an angel and approach an angel, a personal rapport or a network or a personal reference really plays a very good role in securing your angel money. Now, angels will be there with you max 5 to 8 years. Usually angels like to do a shorter period. VCs normally stay with you for a longer time. Some of the angel investors that I can think of is basically Vinod Khosla, the founder of Sun Microsystems. He started the Khosla Ventures, which is actually a VC firm, and I'll talk to you about Khosla Ventures a little while from now. But Vinod Khosla, on his own, with the money that he earned from selling the stake at Sun Microsystems, is an angel, and he lends to a load of small startups. And for example, one of the biggest famous startup that he financed as an angel is Jamcracker. Jamcracker is a IT-based company out of Chennai. Chandrasekhar is the entrepreneur, and they're doing very well. Of course, there is also Redpoint VC. Again, he's also VC, Satish Dharmaraj, who sold his company, Zimra. And he not only is a VC, but he's also an angel, and one of his companies that he financed as an angel is Cloud.com. So you have many of this. In India also we have this Rafiq Malik, who's the owner of Metro Shoes, and he's a very famous angel who loves to invest in small companies. And he's even quoted to saying that in one of the companies that he invested, in fact, he got a return 25 times the amount he's invested. So you can imagine it's such a big high, and you'll go on wanting to be an angel. If you look at Anand Ladsaria, again another angel who actually owns the Everest Masala, and it pays him well to, he says that on a personal level, every year he takes out 10 to 25 lakhs and invests it in about 10 to 20 companies, and he tries to make money. And on the whole, he loses some, he gains some, but on the whole, he thinks it's very exciting to actually fund small startups. So you have ever so many angels in your colony. They will be there all over the place who will be willing to lend you money. But normally angels come more for your seed level needing, not for your growth level needing. And therefore angels are good to cultivate in the beginning for startups. I would next like to go to venture capitalists. So venture capitalists are one step above angels, Normally they say a group of angels can start and become a VC firm. A VC firm is a firm of which all the partners pull in money, keep a fund, and from that fund start lending money to startups. Now they are usually limited partnership, and they what do they want? When a VC comes to you to give money, normally VCs give you money in the form of equity. They come through the equity route. Very rarely do they come on the debt route. Mostly they look at equity. Why equity? Because in the beginning your equity will have a book value, but over a period of years, after you work and your idea becomes successful and your business turns successful, the value of your equity will go some 25 times, 30 times, and that is a sort of a valuation that they are looking at, is that in a couple of years from now, 5 years from now, what would be the value of your business? And when they take a 20% stake or a 30% stake in your equity now, you can imagine 5 years from now, they will have a 30% stake on your bigger valuation. And that sort of a money is what VCs come for, not for your dividends and all that. So they are very clear why they come. They're looking definitely at companies that can give them absolutely high valuations. They're looking at a return of somewhere between 27 to 30 compounded annual rate. And definitely, when a VC enters you or gets into a deal with you, he or she would definitely want to know the exit route, which means, chalo, I'm giving you money today, 5 years from now, how do I get out, right? I need to get out because my main aim as a VC is to put money in your business, make sure you get the valuation, and when you reach that valuation, take my money out and go and invest it somewhere. I am not interested in running your business. Of course, there are two kinds of VCs. There is a hands-on VC and a hands-off VC. Hands-on VC are guys who will involve themselves in your business, probably tell you, change your CEO, do put your financial guy this one, put this CTO should be so and so, or this is because they have their experience, they have their network, and they'll be able to help you and actually better your business because their network becomes your network. You can hook on it, and therefore your business will really look up if you're hooked up to the right kind of a VC. There are also hands-off VCs who will give you the money and don't bother unless you don't meet the milestones or something, then they will just come and raise questions. The question is, as an entrepreneur or as a startup, would you like to have a hands-on VC or a hands-off VC? Is a decision that you and your partners should take. And normally, as I told you, the funds for these VCs comes from their own funds, or they normally in America, of course, they use their pension funds, but in India, they have not yet started this. Let me give you some examples of some of the VC funded companies. If you look at Helion Ventures, they have funded WebAru. They have, of course, we all think VCs as a name became very popular only with IT and IT sector, but VCs are there everywhere, including hospitals, including even beauty parlors. So Helion Ventures are the first guys who actually lend up 20 crores in the form of equity to a chain of beauty parlors in Bangalore called You Look Good, YLG. So it's just not only IT firms like WebAru, etc. If you look at Canaan Ventures of the Canara Bank, Bharat Matrimony, that's Indian famous Indian matrimonial website, iYogi, another IT company. Now if you look at Spandana Ventures, they are the guys who financed Tutor Vista. Of course, they were just not alone. Along with them was the Manipal Educational Society, whom we can call as a strategic investor. I'll explain to you again with this example when I talk about strategic investors. And then we will look at, name them. For example, Flipkart was by Tiger Ventures. So there are many of these ventures who have come all over. Though if you compare to America, in India, in fact, there's a rumor that says if America has about 6,000 deals, then India has roughly around only 500 deals, right? So that is where our venture capital is still very nascent. And I think this is around 2010 or 11, that's what we are talking about. So venture capitalists definitely look at an exit period. How do they exit out? So either we buy the share out from them, that is we means the entrepreneurs can buy them out, or a third party can buy them out, or they can take all their shares and put it for the public offering, which we'll talk about as public equity, and where the public will subscribe and the VC will take his money and go. This is easier said than done. One of the biggest thing is getting the VC to listen to you, pitching to the VC, and then if the VC is convinced that you have a great valuation that can happen, then there would be due diligence of your business, and then there would be a negotiation, then there would be a term sheet signing, and these are all some of the processes that happen while financing by venture capitalists. Now, after VCs, let's talk about private equity investors. Now, this is the new thing that has come up. A lot of private equity people coming into play. What is private equity? Here, what they do is a group of people actually start and form a fund, okay? And this fund is then used to buy equity from various startups. And these private equity guys, again, are same like VCs, and they look for a growth in the VC, and they are responsible to the investors who actually put money into the fund, okay? These guys only actually act as professionals who will manage the funds. So for example, a wealthy people, a couple of corporates, etc., could put their money in a fund that is, for example, if you take, who's that lady? Renuka, she, ICICI Ventures lady, Renuka Ramnath, correct. Renuka Ramnath, she she was the chairman and thing for ICICI Ventures, and she resigned and she started her own called MAM, Alternate Asset Management. And this is a private equity company, and she's created a fund of nearly $500 million, and most of the banks, big corporates have given her this money. Now, she will take this money and she is using it for investing in healthcare industry, because healthcare industry started, healthcare as a sector is, and wellness sector is now the in thing, which is a sunrise, which is going up. And therefore, any startup in this can look and seek to be funded from this alternate asset management company. And then they would, at the end, the term will close and they will remove it, and then the entire amount is then given to the investors, to corporates and banks who have invested in this $500 million. Or if you look at one of the biggest, largest private equity player is Blackstone. They have so many. I know of an entrepreneur in Bangalore who's a centralized parking system, who takes care of the parking systems in all the international airports across India and big malls here. And he's been funded more than about 18 lakhs of his private equity has been funded by Blackstone. So we are looking at these guys who come to fund entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs, by taking in their equity, and then after a couple of years exiting out, again by selling it off on block to the public, or getting bought out by another, maybe another angel or somebody could buy that equity off. Well, you can even look at Shah Rukh Khan and his Red Chilli Entertainment, and Shah Rukh actually was bought the private equity for Kidzania Comfort Entertainment, and started this like a Pugar, no? There's a Kidzania in Bombay. And for that, Shah Rukh Khan again financed and was one of the private equity players. So private equity is there, and I think by far they are far more popular in India than VCs. And we look at public equity next. Public equity, all of us know, is when the shares are thrown open to the public at large, and the public look at these shares, look at the companies, and then actually subscribe to the shares. And then the companies allot these shares to them, and then they start looking at ways in which the company enhances the value of these shares, and then they sell it off in the second-hand market, in the stock market, etc., etc. So public equity, by far, IPO is one of the biggest exit route for angels and VCs, and one of the biggest and largest ways for raising money for companies. I would like to talk a little bit about crowdfunding. Today, crowdfunding is one of the in ways, and in fact, a lot of people are saying that crowdfunding is going to be the next big wave that is going to finance entrepreneurship in any country. Crowdfunding is there. For example, in India, we have Wishberry, Bitsgiving, etc., etc. So what do? They actually keep a portal, and any entrepreneur can actually go and put up their idea and then ask the crowd for money. So when they give this idea, let's say, and you look at it's vetted by the company, the crowdfunding company, and then they put it on board and say, let's say, I'm going to shoot a movie on street children, and I require about 5 lakhs. And the time limit, and you will have people actually giving money, $100, $500, extra. Slowly and steadily the amount grows, and you can actually see it on the website. And what do we get by investing? Basically, if you look at it, it's a refined form of charity, but because in India, they are not allowed to make it as shares and give dividends, etc., then the SEBI rules will come to play. So currently, SEBI is, since it's not under the purview of SEBI, it's still at a very nascent stage. Currently what they do is, if you invest, they will probably send you a photo or give your name and the credit title of the movie, For example, if I fund some of the bangle makers, micro credits for bangle makers, they'll send you a pair of bangles, or they'll take a photo of the artisan who actually received your money and how she has got a new lakh amount and the new bangle design that your money has helped her to create. Sort of recognitions, all these are things that are given to you. T-shirts, mugs with your name printed on it, first tickets for the movie, free tickets for the movie. So these are some of the ways in which the investors are compensated. But more than it, I think the fact that when you give money to a cause and you see the impact that your money has had is a great feeling, and that is what crowdfunding works on. But in foreign countries, it is slowly now being recognized as one of the biggest ways of raising money for small startups, and the government is now looking at ways and means of recognizing this as a part of raising money for your shares. It's getting very, very popular, and I think it's there to stay. Another is the strategic investor, as I called it, are the corporate venture capitals. Are big companies which actually start giving money for causes, and they directly invest in small companies. Basically, it could be their ancillary companies, and they're looking at getting synergies by way of getting through their distribution channels, industry networks, maybe an acquisition potential or synergies with other business units. So many of the big companies usually lend money. In fact, I remember in Goa, most of the industrial estate, whom I had done a lot of research on, the MSMEs, basically they all had a big brother, you know. The big brother is one of your biggest clients who actually gives you money to buy a lot of things, and your machinery, etc. And you know, such people are called as, such companies are called as strategic investors. So these big companies normally lend to you, for example, there's Big Brother and you're running a cutting tool, they'll tell you what type of steel to buy, where to buy, and they'll give you the money to buy the steel. And you do the cutting tools and you sell the cutting tools back to them. So you're sort of caught in a Big Brother syndrome, and therefore when you feel beholden to your Big Brother, and therefore your ability to move to other customers starts getting cramped. That's one trap that initially as a startup, having a big brother is a real big boon. You can actually start and your market will grow. But over a period of time, slowly MSMEs need to wean out from your big brother syndrome and start concentrating and developing in other markets too. Then getting corporate investors really good, and having a strategic investors really good. As I told you about Tutor Vista, and Merit Track is another company which does this online examinations, right? And most of these all have a strategic investor, like the Manipal Educational Society. They are strategic investors by investing in Tutor Vista, etc. They are also there, it's in the education line, so they get a lot of synergies with that. So that is corporate venture capital. So I think I've covered some of them, and what all I tried to talk to you about. But what do all these investors look for in common? As I already told you about the 5 C's, right? Whether it is your commercials, whether it's your commitment, your consistency, your character, all these are really looked for. And the collaterals, what do you have to fall back on? Extreme case of risk, what do you do? What is your plan B for this? So one of the biggest things is definitely, there was a survey in which they asked VCs, what are the top 3 things that you look for in a project before you finance? And the top 3 answers were team, team, and team. And they said that if the idea is average, but the team is superb, the business will do extremely well. But if the idea is too good, but the team is average, the takeoff and the valuations may not be that great. So team and who forms your team plays a very important role. And whenever you're planning to raise money, one of the biggest things is traction. You need to show that you have a fantastic customer. You clearly identified your customer base, how big it is, what is the size, what is the frequency, what is the depth, and basically you need to show and prove that you have a lot of sales orders and So you just can't go in the beginning and just ask them money. You need to have traction. You need to show a proof of your product. You need to show there's a market that is eagerly waiting to grab your product, and you need to show your capability and capacity. So one of the important things is transparency, honesty, how innovative you are, how accountable you are, and you know how responsible you are. And also there are different stages. One of the biggest things that any investor looks for is what is the return on your investment? What do I get in return? In how many years? Can you repay me back my money? Is your business plan sound? Is your business model robust? Now these are some of the questions that the investors will ask. So what are the biggest benefits of actually going to these investors? One of the biggest thing is you have somebody to share your risk, right? That's the first thing. Somebody is willing to believe in your dream and vision and thinks and places confidence that yes, you can actually realize this dream, and then is willing to put his hard-earned money onto your business. So therefore, you have someone to share the business, and also it helps the startup access newer opportunities, maybe widen the market, improve on technology which may otherwise be impossible without money. And also for the fact that you now have another person's money on your head, you've got to have a lot of analytical as well as business discipline, accounting discipline. All this automatically comes because you have to give them a whole lot of documentation. And of course, one of the biggest plus points of taking investors is that you can hook on to their network and actually make use of network, get better customers, and get a whole lot of new advice. What are the cons of actually taking money? I think it's Practo Shashank who said that. I remember seeing in the video, the company is Practo Ray, software for medical practitioners. And Shashank says, I strongly advise startups not to take money in the beginning, first to actually bootstrap, which I'm going to talk to you about later on, because it does not give you the freedom to realize your dream. When you want to start a business of your own, you have this dream, you have this passion, and you want to build it the way you want. The moment you borrow money, you will have to say a couple of yes to a couple of things that the investors may want you to change in your business in order to realize the valuation that they are looking for. In your idea, that may not be what you want to do, but you may be forced to do. So this is one of the partial loss of control, is something that not many entrepreneurs can grapple with. I have a couple of mentees whom when I said, shall I put you on to some angels? They said, no, ma'am, no, I don't want to partake even 1 point of my equity. I'm very clear, ma'am, I will do it. I'll struggle, but I will do it. So one of the biggest headaches is when you go for an investor is this timely reporting. Because the moment you don't send your report and don't send your milestones and how you've achieved your milestones, you'll be breathing down your neck. Also, sometimes the cost that you pay for raising this money is very, very high. There are different kinds of funds that come at different stages. Like, normally it's better that you self-finance yourself, bootstrap, self-finance, etc. Maybe a little bit angel seed funding. There are private seed funders today. Like in India, we have Seed Fund, then we have Unitas Ventures. All these guys actually give us seed funds, and Seed Fund as a venture capitalist has they are the pioneers of seed funding in India. They've also come up with a whole lot of new companies that they have funded. So angels could be a part of this. Venture capitalists normally come after your startup stage, just basically when you're on your growth stage, when you're poised about after 2 years to 2.5 years, when you're sort of settling and looking at ways of expansion, that's when you have to go to venture capitalists. For startup funds, maybe mezzanine funding in between, and also bridge funding before your IPO. These are the areas in which venture capitalists can really play a good role. When you're looking at private equity, basically more for long-term expansion, that's when you actually look at a private equity. And when you look at public equity, that's when you're an established, you created a name and you're a name to reckon with. Then it becomes easier, your valuations have reached, and the level that you want to, and then it's also a good exit route for your VCs. Banks and would basically you look more at your operational needs because they are there and they are more easier, and anyway you'll be having your bank account with the bank company's account. So therefore it makes sense for you to take most of your operational needs, and rotation of money mostly through the banks is much more useful. But the best way to start a business as a startup is to self-finance, friends, family and fools as they call it, as Professor John Mullen says, friends, family and father-in-law. Where do you get your money? Basically from your savings, and basically this is when you raise it from your family and friends, it's much more easier, and you have a whole lot of freedom to do what you want with the money, and exactly the way you plan it. That's the upside, but the downside is that in case you have nobody to share your risk with, and if your business fails, you have your entire family which may or may not support you, and therefore this becomes a very bigger issue. But that's a risk that normally all entrepreneurs take, because usually everybody starts with own money. Do you have to always raise money? Is it possible that you can bootstrap? What is bootstrap? There are two ways in which you can define bootstrapping. One is when you start your own business or you work somewhere, collect the money and then start your dream business. That is bootstrapping. Another is where you bootstrap is actually you tighten your socks and you start economizing, you do shared offices, you do outsourcing, you take the cheapest means of thing. You don't take a salary as an entrepreneur. You do all social media. You use as many free software applications as possible. All these things are a part of bootstrapping. So whether you raise money, for example, if you take Shiv Nadar, when he and his friends were working in DCM, they made calculators and sold their calculators and then started his company, HCL. So you're looking at many others, India Forums, I think his name is Vijay, but he started India Forums and he also bootstrapped. So bootstrap is so many of the entrepreneurs actually work and then slowly start putting their money in, and then saving it up, and while they are working also in the evening they slowly start their business, and then when they feel that the business has actually grown a little big, that's when they leave their business and then start. So all this is bootstrapping. So you can have shared offices, you don't take a salary for it, you outsource as much as possible, do a lean startup by actually going to customers directly all the time to go on improving your product. So these are some of the ways you actually bootstrap, and bootstrapping is actually considered to be the best thing. So you start your business with self-financing and bootstrapping, because when you bootstrap, you're concentrating on cash, not on profits. How do I rotate money? How do I get cash? So this is some of the things that is given in Bootstrap Finance by HBR article. When you're bootstrapping, you are always into operation. You're looking at quickly cash generation. How quickly can I get cash out of it? You do not look at high price and then you make do with whatever you have. You keep the growth in check and concentrate more on converting it into cash so that you can earn that money. And this is basically, you can cultivate the banks extra by being so prudent and very self-sufficient. The banks then start looking at you with a better eye and says, okay, you're very good. I think you're worth to become credit worthy. So what are some of the lessons that you can learn? The longer you wait and the more developed the opportunity, the lesser is your cost of capital. So as I told you, if you have a good traction, then even the banks and any the VCs, the angels, anybody would definitely lend you money in a more confident way, and therefore your rate of interest or the rate at which your cost of raising your capital is will actually start falling down as and when you start proving that you're actually much better as you're growing. One of the primary cardinal rules is never raise money at the at the nick of the time when you need money. It's always better to raise money when you don't need the money and you're going to need it in the future. So you raise it slowly now, And this will give you a whole lot of time to explore a whole lot of opportunities, also to explore and look at the best value in your cost of raising money is actually a little low. And it will also give you a better bargaining power because you're not desperate for money. One of the things that we have to remember is any investor, whatever be the kind of investor who's putting money into your business, will always set certain milestones and achievable targets which needs to be achieved no matter what. And one of the things is it's always better to bootstrap. That way you're not answerable to anybody. One of the most important things is we also need to do a whole lot of research on the investors. Will this VC, is he agnostic to our any of our sector we are in, or are they pro our sector? You need to do a lot of research on the guy who's going to lend you money and check whether they have some happy stories, success stories, how they've helped your fellow entrepreneurs. One of the most important things is, besides doing research, you need to have a very good business plan, and your pitch needs to be very good. Whether it's a banker, government, or VC, or any of your investors, one of the most important things you need to be very careful is how you pitch in your idea to these guys. You get a very minimal time, and in this minimal time, you have to convey to the investor what is your business, what is your business plan model, what is going to be your cost, how much are you expecting from them, and how much can you return to them in how many years, and what is your commercials. Very, very important is your business plan and your pitch. Now, only after you pitch will they look at your business plan, and once they look at your business plan, that's when the due diligence will start, where they'll come for the checkup, they'll do the inspection of your unit and look and do a lot of research on you before they lend money. So therefore, you need to be very clear how much you need, when you need, what for you need, and what are you willing to actually offer them. I would like to suggest that you guys should really watch a video called Shark Tank, SHARKTANK. Shark Tank is a live VC entrepreneur interviews that is happening in the USA TV shows, and it's a reality show. And if you go to Shark Tank, and in fact, I think one of the things that you should see is the foldable guitar. Very interesting. How much stake they ask for how much money. So I think if you watch that video, it will be very clearly useful for you. One of the most important things is try and proceed on your venture as much as you can before you actually start borrowing money or asking for money. Well, I think that in short is what I had to share with you, and I'm now ready to take question and answers.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful session. There are a lot of questions that are coming up. I'll put on a few for you. Ms. Shreya asked, at which point in a company's growth would it be best to approach angels and VCs?
Hello, Guru. I'm not able to hear your voice well. Can you be a little louder?
Yeah, ma'am, I'll again repeat the question. At which point in a company's growth would it be best to approach angels and VCs?
Which point, I think the best, as many of the entrepreneurs have already very clearly told, and many researchers have already said, the best time to go to a VC or an angel is at least minimum 2 to 2.5 years after you start your business and you have proved your point. I think minimum 2 to 2.5 years. That's when you have to go to a VC.
Okay, ma'am.
There should be definite traction, yes.
Okay. Ma'am, there's one more question from Ms. Pooja Thakur. What are the things we should highlight in our presentation while we are pitching our idea to some angel investor or a VC?
That's what I was talking to you about, the pitch, also called as the deck show. That's the make or break of any entrepreneur. One of the most important things that needs to be highlighted in your pitch is be very, very brief. I mean, as brief as you can be. And in that brief time limit, you need to cover, one of the most important things is how big is your market? What is your market size? What has been your current traction? What could be the rate of return on your investment? That's very important. What could be your valuations of your business? What could be break-even point of your business, when you're going to recover your costs and when you'll start going up. And some of the testimonials of your customers all in the pitch would actually really help. Try and keep the pitch as small, at least to 10 slides, and when the VC actually asks you more questions, that's when you actually open up your other slides and explain. That would be much more easier than actually doing everything on one slide.
Okay, ma'am, I hope it answered the query. There's one final question that I'll take up. It's from Keshav Ram Hula. The question is, how important is future cash flows of the project for the banks to grant the loan? Interest terms rollover.
Talking about banks?
Yes, ma'am. How important is the future cash flow of project for the banks to grant a loan?
Yeah, very, very important. I mean, I don't even have to stress it. One of the things is the preparation of cash flow statements. So whichever investor you go, the first thing that they will see is besides your 3 years projected trading profit and loss account, your 3 years projected balance sheet, they also look at minimum 1 year cash flow statement. What are your cash inflows? What are your cash outflows in the next 1 year in terms of investments, in terms of financing, in terms of operations? What are your inflows and outflows? Now this is very, very important because this is the way that will talk to you about your liquidity position. One of the biggest things that worries an investor is, what if you get a cash crunch? What when you suddenly go dry and you're not able to meet your needs? So one of the biggest things they check is all your liquidity ratios, right? Are you liquid enough to meet opportunities? Are you liquid enough to repay back my loan, to rotate your business in your working capital and keep your current assets as liquid as possible, and be able to give money as and when required. Definitely, a strong, robust cash flow statement will be a big plus point for getting your loan as fast as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, Guru.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I would like to conclude the question and answer session now. Thank you very much, Dr. Radhika, for that interesting session. Thank you all our attendees for participating in the webinar. We are glad that all the questions kept coming, but my inbox is actually bursting with questions right now, but because the lack of time, we won't be able to answer them all. Please do send in your feedback and suggestions to us at pururaj@menglobal.org. Also, if you found the session interesting, feel free to blog or post about it. The recorded version of the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel soon. We will share the details of our next webinar also over the mail to you. Please, this is a sincere request to all the faculties and ESL leaders that please update all the list of the candidates on our InCapMe tool. Thank you once again, Dr. Radhika, for such an interesting and wonderful session.
Thank you and happy Diwali to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to all.